Quote of the day. It's amazing what we can do if we simply refuse to give up, by Octavia Butler. All right, so I got all the wiring out for the Terminator X right now. This is all fuel pump, fuel line, oil filter stuff over here underneath the instruction manual, but got a pretty thick instruction manual for all the EFI stuff there. And got a bunch of different wiring. I got the T56 wiring harness still in the box there yet. But this is all the stuff that goes with the Holley Terminator X. We got some coil pack drivers. That's the nice little display screen that goes with it. But then this is all the wiring that goes with it. I think this goes up under the engine. This stuff, coil drivers and fuel injector drivers and some other sensors stuff on there. I'm trying to figure out what that one's really for. So it's a good thing there's a lot of instructions, and I think a lot of this might run inside the car and probably out, well, probably out to all this stuff too, but I'll work on getting this stuff kind of set out and laid out. And I'm trying to debate what I really want to do here, because I know some people have taken the ECU, and so the bigger box is the ECU, the other one is the VVT driver, so the variable valve timing. So I'm debating where I want to put that. I was thinking, well, I could put it under the seat, but I want to have that seat mounted pretty damn close to the floor, just because of the situation that I have with the little racing buckets and everything. Got the battery sitting there. I thought, well, maybe I could put it up off to the other side there, or possibly the seat's going to sit right here. I could even put everything right here on the floor, but I'm not 100% sure how I really want to do this. So I'll probably start laying stuff out, see where stuff kind of fits and jives, so to speak. Because I really don't want to have it up behind the dash, because that's hard enough to get that stuff in and out. I still do want to run heat and AC. Yeah, a lot of stuff to think about here. So I think the best thing to do is start to get an idea of where all my wiring I want to run it. I do know I am going to put the ECUs, the modules inside the car. So it's just a matter of where at this point, and figure out if I want to have the battery on that side or move it to the driver's side. And so that'll drive some change here for the fuel pump wiring if I start moving things around. But just kind of want to get a general idea of where I want things at and develop a plan to move forward with. All right, feeling a little overwhelmed right now. So this is all the wiring that goes with the Terminator X system. There's the fuel tank sitting there. But just kind of running through all this, it's making sense to me, at least a little bit. So this big thick harness is the main harness, of course, from the ECU to all the engine sensors. Coil drivers and the fuel injectors pop in there somewhere. And then this one is for the throttle by wire. So there's a couple loose ends on there. This one is the transmission harness. And this one is for all the VVT stuff. So a bunch of that has to go in there. So somehow I have to snake all this from the inside of the car up through the firewall and up to the engine here. And I also got some stuff laying here too. So one's for the injectors, one's for the coil drivers. I'm starting to think that I should probably move my ECU. I'm doubting that all that wiring is going to stretch all the way from the engine back and around over to where it's sitting over there. So maybe I'll pop the battery to the other side, or maybe I'll just put the ECU and the VVT driver down here. So the seat will be sitting right here. So you can see the 4 bolts here for the seat. Maybe I'll set that stuff up right here. I'm kind of wishing I had the heater box out of the way so it'd be easier to run the wires up through the firewall. All right, so I thought I'd just turn the camera on to kind of document kind of my current thoughts and thoughts on the process of what to do next here. So I got all the wiring out for the Terminator X, and I did kind of lay it out in here. I had it on the floor last night on the shop floor. Then I kind of put it in the car. I was hoping to like run the ECU back here on like one of the rear floor pans or something. I think about the furthest you can get it back, I'm afraid, and kind of talk through my process here, is underneath the seat. But I'm going to have the seat pretty much mounted almost directly to the floor, so I'm seriously doubtful I'll have the space for it there. So I think I may resort to putting it up in the kick panel where the stock ECU goes, or maybe possibly think about putting it behind the glove box here. What I'm concerned with is you have all the heater ducts and everything right here, so I don't know if there'll be room for it up in where the glove box is. So I might do some playing around, figuring around, but that's my whole thought process for today, is just figure out where I can have the Terminator ECU at and the VVT control module. But in the meantime, to try to get things laid out and see how far back I can get the wiring, I think it's probably best to get all the Terminator wiring in place. So my next step is getting all the old wiring out of the way. And I'm going to see about running some of it under the intake manifold. So I'm going to pull this stock intake manifold off. I do have, unfortunately, it's a Gen 2 and not a Gen 3 intake manifold under the shelf there behind the SV radiator box there. So I'm going to get this stuff pulled apart, get all the wiring off there. I'm thinking that really shouldn't take that long to do, so I'm just going to bite the bullet and do it, and then figure out next steps from there. So I'll pop back on after I've made a little progress and see if my thoughts have changed or if that's going to be the game plan moving forward, and I'll keep everyone updated on that. Well, boys and girls, got all the wiring laid out in here. I thought I'd try to fish wire up through all the harness up through the hole in the firewall there. And I'm sure there's plenty of you out there saying, yeah, you dummy, you got to take that heater box out. It'll make your life 100 times easier. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to get the dash frame out of the way here. So I'll have to drop the column and undo a few things. So I thought I'd be able to fish my hand up behind the heater box and fish all this wiring up through. But I have a feeling I'll be a lot happier camper if I get that heater box off the firewall. So that's what I'm going to do. Well, ladies and germs, I'm taking the car further apart in order to put it together again. So I got the heater, the HVAC box sitting here. So the whole point is to get easy access to the holes in the firewall there. So the main one being this dude right up here. So like I said, I think I'm finally to the point where I can start getting all the wiring run. Found the little stud that's on the back of the cylinder head here for ground, and gonna learn how to do some wiring. Not my forte, but I'm a DIY guy, so I'm gonna do it myself. So wish me luck. Shop supervisor's passed out again, sleeping on the job. So I thought I'd show this mess of wires in here. Excuse me. So I thought I'd show this mess of wires in here. I got everything basically plugged into the Terminator X Max controller here. So these are engine control harness. This is VVT. This is the power supply. So I got that hooked up. Well, not hooked up, but I got that sitting there so it's at least in the vicinity. And then this is the VCT or VVT is what I've been calling it, variable valve timing or variable cam timing controller here. So everything's run up through the firewall right now. You can see it up there. But I do have to say, this kit, I did think this was awful expensive for considering it's a bunch of wires and controllers, but I do have to say everything is laid out super nice. Everything is labeled super nice. It hasn't been a whole lot of guesswork. Like everything going over here is all labeled good for the transmission. The variable cam timing is labeled out pretty good, so it's, you know, which wires go where. I was a little confused because this one said bulkhead, so I wasn't exactly sure, but I see this is off the... there's too much in the way. Let me move the power cord out of the way a little. But this is off the main harness, and there was a... I thought it said VVT. Yeah, VVT, so that's why I've been calling it that. So, but that goes over to the VCT controller. Got all the stuff plugged in here for the coil drivers. I have to look back at the instructions and see what this loose bundle, or not loose bundle, but this bundle of wires is for. Got the throttle control out there, and I did this red wire is supposed to be for brake switch. So, and then the ones for the gas pedal, basically the throttle pedal. So I got that running up and over, and that's plugged into the top of the throttle there, and I just have the red with white trace wire just kind of hanging there loose until I figure out how I want to plumb that into the brake switch. And also I thought, well, I saw there was a power wire for the VCT module. I'm like, oh great, now I'm gonna have to figure out how to wire that in. Well, the power wire that was supplied for the whole harness here, it's got the plug-in that goes to the main module, and then there was an extra wire here, and I was wondering about that before. So the one's a fuse, and then the other one's the power supply that goes over to the VCT controller. But like I said, everything's labeled out pretty nicely. There's relays for all the for the main harness here. It's extra input outputs. Everything's got fuses on it that's labeled pretty nicely. So pretty happy with how everything's laying out so far, other than it's just a big mess of wires. So I'm really thinking I'm not gonna have room for these under the seat. So I think it's gonna be to the drawing board and figuring out how I'm gonna fit it up behind the dash underneath all the vents and everything like that. So maybe it'll get to the point of actually having everything back in the car and figuring out where I'm gonna do it, or maybe I can, oh, maybe I can stash it somewhere. But I'll be working on that, and I'll keep you updated to what I figure out and how I end up doing it. Okay guys, I feel like I made some progress on the Mustang here, so I just thought I'd give an update. So I got all the wiring run out to the engine. Well, all the wiring that I'm aware of for all of the injectors, the coil packs, the variable valve cam timing. I do have the oxygen sensor wire hanging out here. I'm just not exactly sure how I'm going to run that yet, so that's one of the things I need to figure out yet, but got most everything else hooked up. I do need to put the fuel pressure regulator back in place over there. I have some transducers coming for the oil pressure and for the fuel pressure. I think the fuel pressure one's optional, but I thought may as well use that too. But feel like I got a pretty good grasp on this. I do need to figure out, because there's a wire for manifold air temp. Then there's some wires for mass airflow. Well, and that's for oil pressure, so I know I need that one yet. But I need to figure out what I'm gonna do for like a manifold air temp, or if I'm gonna go mass airflow, and figure that stuff out too. But I got pretty much everything set out here. Everything's hooked up and pretty much clipped in place. There's a couple where I, like in one of the cam sensors, I couldn't quite hear it click, but I think it's on. Oh, it does have a map sensor in the Terminator X, so probably figure out where I'm gonna run all that to yet. But I got everything pretty much hooked up in here, at least to the modules. So I think some of my next steps here is, oh, I need to hook up the transmission wiring yet. Need to figure out what I'm doing for power, get the fuel pump and all that stuff set up. I do need to run wiring for the starter and the ignition. So that's the big next steps. Probably not going to figure out where I'm going to put this stuff in its final configuration, probably until I know this thing runs. So yeah, quite a bit to do here yet. Quite a bit to figure out where I'm going to put stuff, like when it's all said and done. But I'll get it figured out. Got some ideas kind of floating around in my head how I'm going to mount, or where I'm going to mount the control modules. One other thing I was going to add is some of the stuff was really hard to wrestle around with the engine in here. So one thought is, hopefully I can run all the wiring up and out of the firewall, like the next time I drop the engine, and hopefully just leave all the wiring on the engine, get it bundled up nice when it's all said and done, once I know this bugger runs. And then when I go to put the engine back in, I'll just run the wiring back through the firewall again. At least that's my thought for now. There's a few other things I do need to figure out, like what I'm going to do for fan relays. I think that's kind of the main other thing. Time to continue on.